Welcome to the channel. We have a new unboxing today. As you can see, we have the much maligned MSI Claw. This is the Ultra 5 version, so I believe the 135H. And you might wonder, why this? Well, I wanted to try an Intel device, and because the Claw had such a rough start, the Claw didn't do as well as the Ally and of course the deck, so you can get Claws a lot cheaper now. Used to be this was way more expensive than the Ally version. Now it's actually significantly cheaper. So let's open this up and see what it can do. Now, this video will be a little different than a lot of my Android unboxes. Usually the Android unboxes are essentially almost a live stream of opening it up, setting it up, starting to play some games. But since the Claw is a Windows device, the setup will take a little longer than just getting, say, an RG cube up and running. But let's at least get in the box, see what's in here. We'll also do some size comparisons before we get everything set up. So let's open up the box. What do we have in here? Another box? Oh, I don't even know what that is. Stuff. Just basically little steps here. Power on, Windows update. See, this is all going to take a while. Plus, I believe there's a lot of driver updates, so the chances of me recording all this stuff live is basically impossible. But definitely need to update it because I believe updates have significantly improved this device. So take it out. So we have the Claw itself, Intel Core Ultra 5. Stuff, help. Three-prong power supply. And what do we have here? We have our AC adapter. So what do we got? 55 watts, 65 watts. I think it's 65 watts. Hard to read this stuff for an old man. And I believe that's about it. So we'll put the adapter back in there. Some of this other stuff. Set the box aside because the box is huge. So the handheld comes in a little plastic wrap here. For right now, there's a little screen protector on there. Leave that on for the moment because I got a screen protector I'll probably be applying before I do much else with this. So for now, it can stay on there. So this is basically what you get. So it looks like we got a fingerprint sensor here, which is good. There's our bottom here, kind of somewhat fancy looking. And I believe these buttons all light up. Feels like holding an Ally. Speaking of holding an Ally, let's compare some size. So of course, we're going to clock in at about 11 and a quarter inches wide. And about 4 and let's say 6/8 inches tall. Not all that thick. Yeah, if you count the sticks, maybe about 2 inches or so. If you don't count the sticks, a little less. But of course, this device has competition. So how does it stack up to a Steam Deck? Deck OLED, it's pretty comparable in size. It is slightly less wide. Let me focus a bit here. So we're slightly less wide than the deck. In terms of height, pretty much the same height. Again, a little smaller than the Steam Deck OLED. Maybe a little thicker across the middle, despite being a little smaller. And of course, probably the other main contender here, the Ally. The Ally is less wide than the Claw. The Ally is a little bigger here, kind of all around. It's a little taller too, so the Ally is the baby of these devices. It's kind of hard to think of the Ally as being a baby anything, but compared to the Steam Deck and this MSI Claw, I think, okay, well, the Ally is the baby. And of course, for a more retro vibe, here is the Odin 2 Mini. You can basically fit the entire Odin 2 Mini in the screen of the Claw. And I think the Claw and the Ally pretty much have exactly the same screen. They have the same specs, same size, but definitely compared to the Odin 2 Mini and even the regular Ally, or MSI Claw is kind of a big boy here. As far as just holding on to it, it feels almost exactly like holding the Ally. Like, you know, I guess it's probably what the Ally X looks like because of the black color scheme, but it feels very similar. I mean, the joystick may be a little further over to the left on the Claw, but I think if you compare the ergonomics of the Ally and the Claw, maybe the Claw's D-pad is a little larger. I don't know. They feel very similar button layouts, similar control layouts, even to the macro buttons on the bottom. So far, very similar in how they feel, very similar in how they look. But we have AMD and we have Intel. So before we can get doing anything much else here, I think I'm going to have to go through the long and drawn out process of getting Windows updated and installing driver updates. So I think we will come back to this a little later. Now that we've got the MSI Claw unboxed, we're going to take a little bit more of a look at the device. This is actually a long while after the initial part of this video. The initial part was the unboxing. Now I've applied a screen protector. I have gone through all the Windows setup stuff, installed updates. I have downloaded and installed a bunch of games. I've installed PCSX2 and DuckStation and some other software. So it's actually been several days since the unboxing. I've had a chance to play around with the handheld a bit, so I thought we would just take a look around it. First off, this is the Core Ultra 5 version of the Claw, which is the less expensive one, and we'll see some performance in the gameplay segment. But just looking at the device, of course, we've got Windows here. You can use the joysticks as a mouse if you're in desktop mode. We've got micro SD here, which is where the emulator stuff usually ends up going. There's a fingerprint reader, which is, depending on how the device feels at the moment, maybe a little hit or miss. Sometimes you have to enter your PIN instead to unlock the device. But I found that most of these handhelds are kind of like that, except for the Steam Deck, which doesn't have a fingerprint reader at all. But the Ally certainly can be finicky with the fingerprint reader every now and then. We've got volume controls and a headphone jack, and the buttons here, we have Hall triggers here. I am not a giant fan of the shoulder buttons the way they are. I hear that they break in a little bit more, but the shoulder buttons don't feel as good as some of the competing devices. The On the front, we have your usual start select type controls. There's this button here which brings up Center M, which is kind of MSI's version of the Steam Deck interface or Armory Crate for the Asus handhelds. And we have a button here to bring up kind of the quick menu over here. And we've got two Hall effect analog sticks, which are one of the best things about the device. Now, they have RGB lighting, of course, like all these things do. I've just turned the brightness way down and put it on green just for the heck of it. Kind of maybe an Xbox feel here. We've got front-firing speakers, which are actually quite good for a device like this. So far, the big handhelds have had pretty good speakers, but these are pretty excellent for having your game soundtrack up. You don't feel like you have to have headphones. And we've got some macro buttons if you like that sort of thing. But that's pretty much a tour of the device. It looks a lot like its competition in terms of control placement and where everything is. It just has some slight differences like the Hall sticks and the Hall triggers, and of course shoulder buttons being a little mushy. But other than that, as far as the controls go, looks a lot like its competition. The software is probably the weakest point of the device, I think, so far, because of course we have Intel, which has kind of less mature drivers for everything, and I haven't had any problems with literally games not running, although other people have had it. All the games I've tested, they run, and so far the performance has been better than the Z1 version of, or the non-extreme version of the Asus Ally. And frame rates have been generally better than Steam Deck on a lot of the games, which I guess is not surprising. This should technically be a more powerful device, but the drivers I think hold it back a bit. The other thing is the software. The software here is, you see a game interface, you see some adjustable settings. It is not as well developed as certainly what you'll find on a Steam Deck in terms of controlling how much power you use. There's kind of limited options for adjusting the power. I mean, if you just look, you can see basic things like there's more stuff for adjusting the lighting than there is pretty much anything else. Yeah. And if you're wondering how to adjust the performance, it's under user scenario, which makes a whole lot of sense. You could call it performance, but if you look at that, there's AI engine and extreme performance, which seem to more or less do the same thing. I think the AI engine may cut back the power. All this is just setting the wattage, really. So super battery is the lowest wattage, extreme performance is the highest. So not really a whole lot of adjustment here. You can adjust the fan speed on extreme performance mode, but for whatever reason, not manual mode, which again makes a whole lot of sense. I just don't think the software is very well developed at this point. Maybe it improves later, but if you want to tweak these things like you can with the Ally and the Steam Deck, it's just kind of not there yet. You always want this setting on overboost if you want like good speed and stuff. And I did have to do a BIOS update to enable this sort of thing. Updating this software was a little bit wonky because it refused to self-update, so I had to manually download it. Another thing I found out was if you try to tell the software in the settings to not share data back with MSI, that it will make you agree to the privacy policy every single time you open it. So they must really want your data from your claw, at least your performance data. because they really don't want you turning that setting off. It's probably a bug, but it is something to be aware of. Now, the launcher works pretty much like other launchers. You can launch from this, you can launch from the Windows desktop, but again, there's not a whole lot of settings you can adjust here. There is a performance menu. You can adjust a little bit of stuff in here, like what icons show up. Here's where you would change the performance mode. You can change to one of the other modes to save some battery, maybe, stuff like that. You can adjust the brightness, you can adjust the sound. I have the brightness up higher than normal just because we're under the lights today, but the screen is pretty much the same as the Ally. If you've seen the Ally screen, you've seen this. It may in fact be exactly the same screen. It has the same specs and it looks pretty much the same. So in addition to kind of software wonkiness, you can actually manually activate the keyboard. The keyboard activating when it's supposed to is less reliable than on some of the competing handhelds, but you have the option. The real-time monitor, they apparently can't figure out how to put a bar over the top, so it's all just this sort of thing, which, you know, it works, but I would rather have kind of a unobtrusive bar at the top just to look at frames per second rather than this being kind of too big. But you get some of the typical information. You notice there's no graph to show stuttering or anything like that. Maybe MSI was embarrassed, particularly with the state of the early drivers, because there was a lot of stuttering, and there still is on some games, but to an extent you kind of see that with all of these handhelds. Now let's see, get out of this. So again, you got basic Windows here, and you have the launcher, and MSI does recommend you do a few tweaks to Windows to kind of speed the handheld up a little bit. But setting it up, aside from just Windows quirks and Intel drivers quirks, wasn't that bad. It just took a while because I don't have the fastest internet around here, and it took quite a while to download this software. So it took a few days to get this up and running, but at least it did give me a chance to play around with the handheld for a bit. So I had some idea of the performance, you know, when it comes back to making this first impressions video. So this is a bit longer first impressions video than normal, but it did give me a little time to play around with the device because of things like installing and the holiday weekend and all that. Let's take a look at some gameplay. So in terms of gameplay, I have a few games on here that we decided to run. Those of you familiar with my channel know what the first game is going to be. It's going to be Star Ocean till the end of time, running through the PCSX2 emulator. I also put Champions of Norrath on, and we're also going to look at some Borderlands 2 and some Borderlands 3, see how those perform. The Star Ocean, I should just mention, I think there was some stuff downloading in the background, so there may have been a little bit more jerkiness on that than usual. But that's the thing with these Windows handhelds. They love to do stuff in the background. I think I was downloading a Steam update for Borderlands 3 while I was playing Star Ocean. So that may show in the video a little bit. But let's take a look at the gameplay. And of course, if you want to skip around here, there'll be timestamps so you can skip to a game or just skip past the games and come back later on.
Moron, know your enemy before you strike the first blow.
No problem.
I can take him on myself.
That was fun. No problem.
I can take him on myself.
That was fun.
Looks like this place may be a little hot to handle.
Oh, so you're the one. Of course, it all makes sense. What else would a big orc be doing out in the fields if it weren't for some overlander? I told Bingham, Master Vince, that this would happen. The orc don't. Shooter!
So, since I've had time to play around with this for a while, I thought it would give a few pros and cons to the Claw here, the Ultra 5 Claw. So, what I like about the device, the joysticks are really good to use. I mean, they're some of the better sticks that are out there on these devices, and you can definitely tell the difference when you play with this as opposed to some of the smaller retro type handhelds in terms of how sensitive the joysticks are, and a lot of the smaller devices are just like way too quick to go to maximum. Dead zones are actually pretty good in this from what I've tried. So I like kind of the controls, except for the shoulder buttons here. Controls feel pretty good. The performance of the device for what it is, the lower end device here, is actually pretty good. In terms of performance, I would rate it between the original Z1 Ally and the Z1 Extreme. I get consistently better performance on most of the things I've tried than my cheapo Z1 Ally, but from what I can tell, it's not up to the performance of the Extreme. So there's that. I like the I like that the sound is actually really good on this, without having to use headphones. Of course, this is pretty common in the larger handhelds, but this is actually very good. And buttons are nice. You can't tell here, but the buttons light up at night if you want. And that's actually kind of nice playing the handheld in the dark. Although it's good you can turn these down. You don't want the backlighting here for the buttons and sticks, blinding you when you're trying to game at night. But I like that the buttons here are backlit. The buttons feel pretty good, except again for the left and right bumpers here, which are a little mushy at this point. I have heard that they will break in, but I haven't had that yet because I've only had the handheld for a few days. The D-pad, I don't do a whole lot of D-pad gaming on this. If you're a D-pad focused person, you probably are less interested in these big PC handhelds anyway. But the D-pad works for the kind of games I play, where you're mainly using this to select options. I haven't really tried any old school platformers on here because that's not really what I get this thing for. I mean, this is strictly PlayStation 1 and above, at least for me. So D-pad works for what it is. But I'm not going to say I've tested really a bunch of D-pad centric games on it, because that's not really my use case. So I like that sort of thing. Bad things, of course, the original bad thing of this was the price. I certainly would not recommend this handheld at anything near the retail price. If you're able to get it for some of these sale prices that are on Newegg and some other places, then it becomes a little bit more of a value. Like, for example, You can get the Ultra 5 version, if you look around, for less money than the Z1 Ally, which actually makes it a pretty darn good deal. But the original retail prices for these, I would not I would not even consider this device. So price for the at least the original retail price of these things is definitely a negative for the Claw. The Claw doesn't deliver enough performance to justify what MSI wanted to sell these for initially. It just doesn't. And you if you get it on sale, though, the calculation changes a bit. But originally this was more expensive than the Steam Deck OLED, more expensive than the Z1 Extreme Ally, so not a good deal at all. But apparently they're looking to sell some before the next generation comes out, so at the lowered price, maybe worth consideration. The other bad thing about this is really, like I said, the software experience is kind of where the Claw is lacking. The launcher software is not as polished as the competitors. The Intel drivers don't probably give you the performance that you get out of the AMD drivers. Intel supposedly is improving that, so the Claw may improve a little bit more as its life goes on. But given the driver performance, it's certainly not worth paying more for an MSI Claw than you would pay for, any of the AMD options. So mainly the bad parts are not the device itself so much as the software support for the device. So this is my look around the MSI Claw Ultra 5. So just kind of to sum up, am I enjoying this handheld? Yes, I'm actually enjoying this a lot. Just downloaded Everspace 2 from the Steam sale and starting up a replay on this. I enjoyed this on the PlayStation 5. I was looking forward to playing it on PC when things got cheap enough. So looks like we're in that territory now. So the Claw here performs fairly well as long as you're comparing it to the lower end of some of the competition, like the regular Z1 Ally, and it's comfortable. As far as battery life goes, I haven't seen a whole lot of difference between this and the Ally. The battery's bigger here, but I don't think the drivers are optimized for getting the most out of the battery. So, yeah, it ends up being kind of a wash. This has, at least in my experience, similar battery life to the regular Allies, and certainly doesn't compare to the Ally X. But then again, the whole point of this is, would I recommend this? Only if you can get it substantially off of the original list price. So on sale, on open box, on clearance, this is a pretty fun device to get and play around with. So in conclusion, I guess, I'm enjoying this, but in terms of what I recommend to other people, only if you can get it for a nice cheap price, because full price it's just not worth it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you enjoyed it, give a like. If you want to see more gaming and handheld related content, remember to subscribe to the channel. And if you have any comments, comment section is always open. See you next video.